Greetings and welcome to Hymn Stories number 82, So Send I You. So send I you to labor unrewarded, to serve unpaid, unloved, unsought, unknown, to bear rebuke, to suffer scorn and scoffing. So send I you to toil for me alone. So send I you to bind the bruised and broken, or wandering souls, to work, to weep, to wake, to bear the burdens of a world aweary. So send I you to suffer for my sake. So send I you to loneliness and longing, with heart a-hungering for the loved and known, forsaking home and kindred, friend and dear one. So send I you to know my love alone. So send I you to leave your life's ambition, to die too dear, desire self will resign, to labor long and love where men revile you. So send I you to lose your life and mine. So send I you to hearts made hard by hatred, to eyes made blind because they will not see, to spend though it be blood to spend and spare not. So send I you to lose your life and mine. So send I you to hearts made hard by hatred, to eyes made blind because they will not see, to spend though it be blood, to spend and spare not. So send I you to taste of Calvary, as the Father hath sent me. So send I you. Hopefully you enjoyed that hymn. It's one of my favorites that I'm used to singing quite frequently. So send I you. The author of this hymn is E. Margaret Clarkson. Was born in 1915. Composer John W. Peterson, 1921. The meter reading was for this hymn is 1110.1110 with a closing refrain. And the scripture reference for the hymn itself is John 20:21. The scripture reading for this hymn is from Isaiah 6, verse 8, which reads, I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Then said I, here am I, send me. The text of So Send I You, sometimes called the finest missionary hymn of the 20th century, was written by a young Canadian, then just 22. Born in Saskatchewan, Margaret Clarkson grew up from age 5 in Toronto. Graduating as a teacher in 1935, jobs were so scarce that she had to spend 7 years in the far north of Ontario, first in a lumber camp and then in a gold mining area, before returning to teaching her remaining 31 years in Toronto, retiring in 1973. Over 50 years, she had been known for her poems and articles in Christian periodicals, for her many hymns. and for her books, now 16 in number. Among them are Susie's Babies, All Nature Sings, and 2 books of suffering which have proved helpful to many. Destined for Glory and Grace Grows Best in Winter, all published by Ettermans. Of the writing of this, as the writing of this text, Miss Clarkson has written, "In the North I experienced deep loneliness of every kind, mental, cultural, and particularly spiritual. I found no Bible-teaching church fellowship and only 1 or 2 isolated Christians in those years. Studying the Word one night and thinking of the loneliness of my situation, I came to John 20 and the words, 'So send I you.' Because of a physical disability, I could never go to the mission field, but God seemed to tell me that night that this was my mission field, and this was where He had sent me. I had written verse all my life, so it was natural for me to express my thoughts in a poem. Some years later, I realized that the poem was really very one-sided. It told only of the sorrows of privations of the missionary call and none of its triumphs. I wrote another song in the same rhythm so that verses could be interchangeably, setting forth the glory and hope of the missionary calling. This was published in 1963. It is interesting that many of the newer hymnals are now dropping my first version in favor of my second one. I rejoice at this, for all I wish to be a biblical writer, and the second hymn is the more biblical one. So send I you, by grace made strong to triumph, o'er hosts of hell, or darkness, death, and sin, my name to bear, and in that name to conquer. So send I you my victory to win. So send I you to take to soul's bondage the word of truth that sets the captive free. To break the bonds of sin, to lose death's fetters, so send I you to bring the lost to me. So send I you my strength to know in weakness, my joy in grief, my perfect peace in pain. To prove my power, my grace, my promised presence, so send I you eternal fruit to gain. So send I you in sorrow yet rejoicing, as poor in store yet boundless wealth to give, as having not and yet possessing all things, so send I you the life of heaven to live. So send I you to bear my cross with patience, and then one day with joy to lay it down. To hear my voice, well done, my faithful servant, come share my throne, my kingdom, and my crown. The music for So Send I You was composed especially for Margaret Clarkson's hymn by John W. Peterson, often called the Dean of Contemporary Gospel Songwriters. The impact and contributions to church music of John Peterson's faithful ministry since World War II are generally well known to most evangelical Christians. He has composed more than 1,200 gospel songs, hymns, and choruses, as well as supplying church choirs with more than 20 cantatas and musicals, which have thrilled and inspired Christian audiences with various themes from the gospel message. John Peterson also co-authored the hymn, Surely Goodness and Mercy. John W. Peterson was born in Lindsborg, Kansas on November 1st, 1921, and spent his early days in Salina, Kansas. In 1939, he began a radio evangelistic work with his 2 brothers, and at that time began writing his first gospel songs. In 1942, Mr. Peterson entered military service and served as a pilot in the Chinese Burma theater. Commenting about this period of life, he says, I had many precious spiritual experiences during those days, and many of my songs now in print had their belongings somewhere in India or Burma or high above the Himalayan mountains. After his military service, Mr. Peterson matriculated and was graduated from the Moody Bible Institute, and later continuing his musical training at the American Conservatory of Music, completing a major in music theory in 1950. John Peterson has since been awarded an honorary doctor's degree from Western Conservative Baptist Seminary, and also from Brown University, in recognition of his musical contributions to the gospel ministry. The Peterson family presently resides in a small community near Phoenix, Arizona, where John continues to write new sacred compositions. He travels around the country conducting choral workshops. In his book, The Miracle Goes On, Mr. Peterson often mentions his conviction about the power of a gospel song to change a person's life. He cites the following example. So Send I You was used by God in the life of an actress who had come to know Christ and who faced an agonizing decision. Should she maintain her professional contacts or give up her career and dedicate her life completely to the Lord for service, wherever he might lead? In the midst of her dilemma, she sat listening to a recording of this song, and its challenge came through with stunning impact. The actress fell to her knees and made a total commitment of her life to God, and in due time, he resolved the question of her vocation. Hopefully you enjoyed this hymn story number 82, So Send I You, and I look forward to seeing you in our next hymn story. Take care, Lord bless you, and have a wonderful and blessed day. Bye for now.